Shalom and welcome to another edition of Parsha Talk. I'm Rabbi Elliot Malamet in Highland Park, New Jersey, at the Highland Park Conservative Temple Congregation Anshe Emet. And joining me, my good friends, Rabbi Jeremy Kalmanovsky, Anshe Chesed, New York City, and Rabbi Barry Chesler of the Solomon Schechter Day School of Long Island. We're recording this, a couple of weeks before the Parsha Pinchas. We hope that things have evolved and news changes. In the event that they're not, we're still praying for the release of the hostages and for all the bereaved and all the wounded and all those who have been displaced by the war. Lots of suffering that people are going through, a complicated time that's changing. The whole Middle East is changing even as we speak, and that's speaking from the perspective of June 26th, which is several weeks before Parshat Pinchas, which is what we're going to talk about. Let's just dive right into this. I don't want to talk about Pinchas. I don't want to talk about Benot Tzlafchad. These are important stories in this parsha. We could talk about the census, but you know what? Pinchas is known to the synagogue life of a Jew. Is Pinchas is familiar to us on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, and on a seasonal basis. Weekly, because Uviyom Shabbat, Shnei Chvasim B'nei Shana Tmimim, right? And on a
I want to hear you. I want to hear you do that one. Chazanish. Uviyom, uviyom.
Yom Shabbat, Shnei Chvasim B'nei Shana Tmimim, right?
Now do it with the voice of God.
Uvrashei Chodshechem, right? Month Rosh Chodesh. Actually, today's Rosh.
It so happens that today
Is Rosh
we,
Chodesh
we were
Tammuz.
recording this we were recording this on June 26th, and today's Rosh Chodesh. So we read Pinchas this morning.
Okay. So let's just if there's a parsha that people would be familiar with, it would be this parsha. Because people are familiar with quotes from this parsha because they're the sacrifices. And you know what? Let's talk about this because we never talk about this in the way that I think it deserves to be talked about. This is a calendar. This is a menu. This is, you know what? In a chaotic world, let's do it with this theme. In a chaotic world, the kind of world in which we live, it is important to have things that ground us. And despite the fact that these rituals and this method of worship comes from a different era that is really sometimes indecipherable to us, these were the things that grounded us. You read this and you go like, yeah, it's order here. And there's an order to the sacrificial cult. There's an order to the way that we worship. This was the order in biblical Israel.
So,
We have a different order in contemporary Judaism. And you know what? That's what religion's all about. It's about grounding us.
so what do you really think's at stake here?
Is that a steak joke?
It was.
Okay.
What's at stake here is
Let me flesh this out a little bit. Um, so we have this description of the basic sacrifices, as you indicated, for Shabbat, Rosh Chodesh, the Chagim,
and the daily. I forgot the daily.
and the daily, the John Stewart, right? So how do you understand this actually working in the life of the people? So let's say you're living outside of Jerusalem, not too far. How often are you going to bring a sacrifice to the temple?
You know what? I'm going to say whenever I need to, and I
But
need.
what does that mean?
What
I'm
does
just
that
trying to
mean?
understand.
Yeah,
We have this idea there's one person, he brings one animal. Okay, I get that. But this is for something that's ongoing. How many animals from your herd are you going to be sacrificing every year?
yeah. I don't know.
I think I think that's a, you know, there's no, there's, in a sense, it's an impossible question to answer because no law book ever describes what people do. Law books describe what people should do. So if I tell you that if commit any of the sins of the Torah and you have to bring a chatat, I'm describing a certain kind of ideal order, a way in which people can deal with their wrongdoing and get right with God. But we cannot possibly know. I mean, at some point in ancient Israel, it wasn't just a single central mikdash for everybody. There
Right,
were
but here it
local.
is, right? I mean, in the Midbar.
I don't really know. I mean, does this Bamidbar reflect that emphasis in Deuteronomy that it always has to be the place where he will make his name dwell? Or could it be like in Vayikra, which seems to imagine, lots of altars, local altars? But so whatever. If I happen to, we could imagine it being something like a local altar situation in which, yeah, you do something wrong and you can get right with God. Um, but even if it's not that and it's the central Mikdash, what we're saying is that you may go on pilgrimage once a year and you may have, got some guilt that you need to deal with, or you may have, you may have to have dealt with your skin affliction and you have to do the ritual part, or you had a baby and that involves a sacrifice as well. So there are times in life where what we imagine is that this is an order that helps you deal with alienation and whatever the opposite of alienation is, reintegration.
Let me pose this idea, which is that let's assume for a moment that there is pilgrimage going on here, and of course the Pinchas sacrifices are all about the calendar, the regular calendar, which is the daily, the Shabbat, the Rosh Chodesh, and the various holidays. Okay, so to a certain extent, there is pilgrimage, and I'll put the word spectacle. That is to say that from time to time, a worshiper, will be going to this place, whether it's Jerusalem or other places, and they will be witness to the spectacle of this. And the only reason why I mention this is because we now encounter spectacle in a different order of experience. A different, some of us may regard the weekly service in the synagogue, depending on the structure and the architecture and the whole experience, the aesthetics, etc., as spectacle, but we tend to go elsewhere for spectacle. So, for example, sporting events, the spectacle of the game, whether it's basketball, baseball, hockey, football, etc. There's a certain kind of environment in the arena or in the stadium where you are part of something larger than you, and the spectacle is going on. Both, let's say it's a basketball game, you're watching it, you're involved in it, and of course there's other things going on in the stands. Maybe certainly if you go to a baseball game, the spectacle is really incidental to whatever else is going on in people's lives, because it's not about the game necessarily. Um, I'm thinking about theater, and I'm thinking about music, and I'm thinking about performance, the performance arts, dance, etc., where these are part of our experiences. Those of us who are able to go to live events, on a regular basis, maybe once a year, twice a year, or maybe once every couple of years. These are important. I mean, occasionally I'll have the opportunity to go to a musical. Um, and you know what? It's fun. It's entertaining. Occasionally, it's edifying. It gives you an experience, an emotional experience. And so the sacrificial ritual and cycle is as much spectacle as it is worship, and people need that, I think.
We in that vein, first of all, again, we're recording this in June. I'm soon to go to my personal favorite spectacle with
With
a
a
guy
certain,
from a guy from New Jersey who's going to rock the house, and that is a uh it's 10,000 strangers or 20,000 strangers, however many it is, but it's also an incredibly communally binding moment that anybody who's a shul person would know, because we all sing together,
yes,
and that great performer knows how to bring everybody. And if you go to a lot of Springsteen shows, you know exactly what the parts are and what the call and response parts are, and it's familiar. I went to a Mets game a couple of weeks ago, and when Frankie Lindor comes up, they play My Girl, and everybody sings. And in the seventh inning stretch, they play the Louis Prima song, whatever the Italian song is, and everybody sings. And so the Take Me Out to the Ball Game they play, and so there may be things that the community really binds itself together with. Even though the Kohanim do the ritual, I can only imagine that like the Levites on the 15 steps up are singing the Psalms and maybe everybody is singing along. It seems like there's probably a good deal of communal connection that's created.
So what's interesting about Pinchas is that we're only getting one layer here of the experience of we're not getting the Levitical experience of singing with the sacrifices. We're not getting the pilgrims experience. We're certainly not getting the smells of it, and we're not getting the seasonal you know meteorological effects of this, and we're not getting the family and the community out of this. So what we're getting here is someone saying, "Look, on this day, you bring this amount of these animals. I'm just going to pick uviyom abikurim." Mincha charasha lana b'shavutoichem, v'kraftem olah l'reich nichoach. This is the sacrifice. Parim b'nei bakar shnayim. You get two cows. Ayel echad, a ram. Shiva kvasim b'nei shana. 7. So you're getting a menu here, and there is significance to the numbers of animals, and they all correlate to I think a different kind of to a system that relate to what kinds of sacrifices, but you don't get the human experience. And as we like to say, I like to say also, you don't get the story here because there is a story here. The story is a people comes close to God and needs a method to do that, and needs to go home from that, and needs a kind of spectacle to change that experience for them. It needs this certain kind of environment. So moving on then to another aspect of this parsha, and I think this is what touches us closely as rabbis. It's come before the part of the sacrifices, but I want to, you know, Moses and Joshua. This is
Wait,
a.
before we do
Oh,
the
go ahead, go
sacrifice, can I
ahead.
just say one thing? Um, our listeners are probably familiar with the phrase that the Talmud cites to Rabbi Akiva, the Midrash cites to Rabbi Akiva, "Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha ze klal gadol b'Torah." Love your neighbor as yourself is the most important principle of the Torah. There is another version, which does not appear in the Talmud, but it appears in a kind of anthology of like lighter Talmudic material, Agadot, some of which doesn't actually appear in our Talmud, called the Ein Yaakov, which was edited in the 15th or 16th century or something like that. I don't exactly know. And it says something which at first glance is kind of not so elevating, but actually has some wisdom. It says, Et hakevas echad taseh baboker ve'et hakevas hasheni taseh ben arbaim. You offer one lamb in the morning, you offer one lamb in the afternoon, Zeh klal gadol b'Torah.
That's
And
it.
this is the most important mitzvah in the Torah. And at one level, it's like, yeah, that's not as good as love your neighbor as yourself. But at another level, it is a statement about religious performance and commitment. And like, what's the most important thing? Get up tomorrow morning and do it every
Exactly.
day. That's Korban Tamid. Every day, 365 days a year, we're always going to just show up and do this. And I find that pretty moving. And when I think it's possible that this is going to appear right around the 17th of Tammuz. I don't remember our
Just
date.
after, I think.
Just after?
I think so.
The 17th of Tammuz, the fast day that sort of begins the period of mourning, involves a bunch of things, including the nullification of the Tamid sacrifices, the every single day, one in the morning, one in the afternoon, in the Roman siege, or maybe the Babylonian siege, but somebody's siege. And and I think that's pretty moving that the disruption and the destruction are at least partly about the pattern and the regularity and the everydayness. And that's really a big part of Jewish observance, the everydayness. Sometimes you feel like it, sometimes you don't feel like it. It doesn't matter how you feel like it. To be an
So,
observant Jew is to get up and do it.
can you maintain the spectacle every day? Or in the course of time, does the tamid, the daily sacrifice, become so routinized that it's robbed of meaning?
Look, this is the tension within Judaism, I guess, and maybe all religions have this on some level, which is At what point do things become too routine? We have the keva kavana struggle, the tension between those things that we do all the time and doing it with the deepest intention. It's very, very hard to sustain that.
Yeah,
And
we who are daily daveners
yeah,
know that sometimes you phone it in a little bit. Sometimes you're checking the clock, but the skill and the capacity that I feel like by doing it every day, I build capacity. And Heschel has what you was said is a problem, the routinization. It's an issue. I mean, the Heschel has a little Hasidic story in the Quest for God book that goes, I think this is where it is. Well, it was wherever it is, somewhere. Uh, and you have to imagine a technology that I'm sure that our listeners have long forgotten, which is that you wind the watch. The watch has all these little small gears, and you have to keep winding it to make the tension. So they're all the gears and all the cogs and the wheels are turning. So there's a town where all the watches are, they've all been broken. And the watchmaker finally comes to town. It's a small town. They don't have their own watchmaker, but the watchmaker comes in on the train from Minsk or Pensk and um, comes to fix the watches. And he says that those that the people wound anyway, even though they were not working, if you kept winding it, the gears could be fixed. But those that people stopped winding it rusted shut.
yeah, use it
Great
or lose it.
story.
Use it or lose it. All right, turning to the other theme that precedes this, which is transmission, transition, and transmission of authority, transition of generations. I'm going to turn to chapter 27, verse 15, where God, Moshe, Vaydaber Moshe el Adonai, Lemor. This is a reversal. Moses speaking to God. Yifkod Adonai Elohei Aruchot L'chol Basar Ish Aleida. Let God appoint someone on the community. Asher Yetzil Lifnehem, who will go before them. Asher Yavol Lifnehem, who will go, out and in. Asher Yotzi'em, Asher Yavi'em, someone who will bring them forward to war and maybe not, maybe to peace. V'lo tiyeh adat Adonai katzon asher ein lahem ra'eh, and lest the community of God be like sheep without a shepherd. Moses giving us that beautiful, beautiful image of the the shepherdless herd, right? And what would happen? I mean, just I don't know. That image, speaks to us because it's Psalm 23. Adonai ro'i lo echzar. Maybe is Psalm 23 hearkening to this? Maybe, maybe not. But uh, he is supposed to give of his own glory. Vanatata mehodcha alav. Later on, I just want to think about this moment, this delicate moment in the life of a community, where and the life of the people. This is the first moment where transition has to take place. It's inevitable. It's a moment fraught with all sorts of difficulties, dangers, even. That's one way to look at this scene. I think that the contemporary question for us is leadership and drawing people into leadership. And here, we have a wide audience. We are still the most, for about 8 years, 9 years, maybe 12 years running, we are the Dutchess County best Parsha talk in Dutchess County. We are speaking to a community also of potential rabbis, leaders, everyone possible, um, and the idea that we are teaching here, and that the leader is a teacher, um, and that Moses is turning to Joshua for the peculiar characteristics that Joshua has. And we are a certain generation. At camp, they had Parsha Talk the Next Generation one summer. We're looking forward to that as well. Anywhere you want to connect to this theme, transition, transmission, rabbis, the rabbinate. Um, I would like to hear your thoughts on Moses and Joshua and the future of Judaism. Pick it up wherever you want.
That's too open-ended,
Too
man.
open-ended. Okay.
No, it isn't. So
Okay, then you pick it up.
what distinguishes Joshua, I think, is in verse 18. Kach lacha Yehoshua ben Nun, take to yourself Yehoshua ben Nun, ish asher ruach bo, a man who already has spirit within him. So there was something about Joshua that made him an attractive candidate. And we had a transition 2 weeks ago in Parasha Talk with the death of Aaron, where Aaron is going to go up the mountain with his son, who is going to succeed him as the high priest. And there, the ritual is about clothing. Here, it's about touch and speech. And the spectacle goes with the priesthood, right? The change of clothes, the costume change, as it were. This is not really a spectacle. And I think it's harder to manage because of that. Because what is going to make Joshua attractive to Bnei Yisrael? They've only known Moshe as their leader, and Moses has to give him something in a way that everyone will understand that Joshua has what it takes.
So is this charisma? I mean, when you say Isha Sheruach Bo, you'll forgive my direct translation, but a person who has wind in them, and we
You're
could say,
missing the point because in the previous quote that you used, where
yes,
you described God as Elohei Haruchot, you
yes.
didn't say that God was a windbag.
No, but I could say that Joshua could be a person with hot air, right? And we,
No, I
Rabbi,
think the connection is with the Ruach Elohim.
okay, of course, okay,
In addition to that, Joshua's uh, partner in virtue, not partner in crime, Caleb in
Right,
Parshat
you're right.
Shlach Lecha, you know, after the 10 spies, this is a very curious story because Joshua and Caleb are clearly the good guys, but Joshua doesn't really take a leadership role in resisting the slanderous spies. Caleb is the guy who does all that, and God says to Moshe, "I've had it with these people. They're terrible, terrible, terrible. They're awful." But Avdi Caleb ruach acheret bo. Yeah,
yeah.
he's got a different spirit. So I hear that story in this statement as well, that you have people who are, just they're part of the undifferentiated mass. I mean, in real life, I don't think that as a synagogue rabbi, I certainly don't think that anybody's part of the undifferentiated mass. But Caleb in that story, Joshua in this one, they've got a special kind of spirit that befits them for a different role.
So let me ask you then, to what extent is charisma this, in the species of characteristics that would define this leader? Would you say that Joshua is a person of charisma, and then by extension, is charisma on some place in the spectrum of charisma a necessary quality for leadership? You know,
It depends on what you mean by charisma. As I understand that charisma originally was the divine touch. People who had charisma were directly touched by God. And I think that's what Joshua has. He has this connection to God. That describes him as a person. Not every, and it belongs, I think, in terms of biblical leadership with prophets, because the priests and the kings achieve their leadership through heredity.
mhm.
Only the prophet needs something from the outside to confer authority on him or her.
Right. So, we have prophets who are charismatic prophets. Um,
We don't really have any dull ones.
Yeah, I think the prophecy, almost by definition,
be charismatic.
is a kind of gift. I mean, I think that's what the Greek word charism actually means. It's a rare gift. I don't really know anything about Joshua, I have to say. You have different you have different pictures of him. He's Misharet Moshe from his youth. He's like
Steward.
Valet.
his
His
valet.
Sancho Panza. Guess,
He's his Sancho Panza, and then he is a kind of military. And then clearly in the book of Joshua, his prowess seems to be military, um, and that seems pretty bold. Uh, he's very solicitous that Moshe not be usurped by Eldad and Medad. But here in this story, this is one little detail that the rabbinic interpreters like. God says, place your hand singular on him, and Moses places his hands plural. Like God said, okay, give him a little gift, and Moses, in his great generosity, gives a full gift. It's we get these different pictures, and I don't really know. I mean, I've often sort of felt that, like, why does Moses have to leave the stage? There's any number of reasons, and you got those certain explanations about the hitting the rock and the whatever, and I personally think that the hitting the rock, we've discussed this over the years, is a stand-in for smashing the tablets, and that's really the punishment. But it's also possible that the whole story of the transition of Moses to Joshua is what was needed in the desert is not what's needed in the land, and you're a teacher, and you have you have a channel by which you teach us about the mitzvot, you teach us about Torah, and you know what we need for Joshua? We need Dan Shomron. We need a kind of a military leader we need whoever it is, like uh the guys from Entebbe. That's who we need, and Joshua more represents that.
I remember, in the literature or in the conversations around rabbinical searches, we this is something that's been, written about and caricatured, and that committees are looking for they're always looking for the perfect candidate. They're always looking for the perfect rabbi, someone, who has the executive skill of like a CEO, the Lee Iacocca, that's a name from generations ago, with the soul of the Baal Shem Tov. These are the paradox of the rabbinate. Um,
A
but
30
let's
year
say
old a 30-year-old guy with 30
with
years
40 years of
experience.
experience. Say there is a camper out there in our community of listeners who is just tuning in and listening to three
Old man.
older
Distinguished.
older distinguished rabbis, and may have their curiosity piqued by the rabbinic life, and what is a possibility for them. There ought to be in any population of hundreds of Jews, one or two that may want to think about a life serving the Jewish people. So as someone who is, I love being a rabbi, and I think the three of us love being rabbis. Uh, we could say that this is a very satisfying life, and that, as difficult and challenging as it can be often, I'm just going to ask both of you to weigh in on what is satisfying about the rabbinic life. But I'll start off by saying, to be a part of a community and to be a part of a living entity of the Jewish people, and to be one of the narrators of that story, in addition to being part of the life of Jewish law and Torah and tradition, I think is the greatest privilege of being a Jew, of being a rabbi. And I would wonder, if you could, if someone is just hearing us talk about the rabbinate, and they kind of get piqued in curiosity as to what would be so beautiful about this life and why they should become a rabbi, if they should, because we need rabbis, we need good rabbis.
Your job as a rabbi, it's multifaceted, but I would say that overall, your job as a rabbi is making Judaism meaningful for people in their lives. Okay? You get to study and talk about our traditions and its wisdom and its beauty and its poetry. You get to come through for people, um, in moments of great joy and sorrow, and use Judaism as the story of life that is going to help people make meaning out of their own individual lives. So I feel incredibly blessed to be able to be invited into people's, I have X many congregants, and they would like to be involved. They would like me to help them feel that they are Jewish in ways that affects their morals, affects their spirituality, it affects their communal commitments, it affects their commitment to all of Am Yisrael, the Jewish people, wherever they are. And we transmit the Torah, which is such an amazing tradition. I'm going to give you an example. And if there are, whether you happen to be, you know, wherever you are in life, if you're a chanich or chanichat, Machane Ramah Berkshires, or you're just enjoying our
Regular
conversation,
listener of Parsha Talk.
regular listener, one of the distinguished and elder listeners, such as ourselves, I got an email from a young couple this week, uh, Jewish woman and her romantic partner, who is an Egyptian Muslim, and they would like to come in and talk about how it is that they think about, and in their personal relationship, but in their international, their national one too. How is it they think about this ongoing conflict? And I thought to myself, okay, I really don't know these people, but man, what an amazing responsibility and opportunity to help people talk about things of very, very important significance.
To their own lives, and that's of you know private but also geopolitical ramifications. Barry, you are a teacher, the rabbinate.
We're having it. Comes down to one word, prism. So many years ago, I think as part of a job search questionnaire, we had to identify a symbol that spoke to or exemplified our rabbinate. And to me, that symbol is a prism. We are accustomed to seeing white light, which has no color to the eye, but when the light is reflected or refracted through the prism, we understand that light is a continuum of a rainbow. It is many different colors aligning into each other. And the job of the rabbi is to take the white light of Torah and create a world of color for the people that embrace it.
It's so
And that
interesting.
That
Yeah,
is an awesome,
awesome,
awesome
awesome
image.
image. That we can all learn from. And look, the three of us have different bands, different frequency bands on the prism, in the ways that we have just reflected on. Narration of the story, the involvement in community and beyond, and of course the transmitter, the translator, the to be able to provide that. And so there's so many more. So what we should do is say, if there's anybody out there listening to us that's interested in becoming a rabbi and would like more advice, please feel free to email us and contact us. Uh, and but for all of us, I think this is a moment of gratitude, a moment to express this gratitude for having this wonderful calling, profession, place in life, and the gratitude for people who are listening and watching, who see a value in the study of Torah in this moment with these three people who are doing this with you, and wishing you, as always, at the end of our Parsha Talk, Shabbat Shalom. May there be
Shabbat
peace
Shalom.
in Israel, the rescue of the hostages, and the safety of Klal Yisrael. And we'll see you and talk to you soon again on the next edition of Parsha Talk. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Bye bye.